The silence in the command center was deafening. The only sound was the steady thrum of the station's reactors, their deep hum vibrating through the metal walls. Commander Ridge Thorne stood at the center of the room, staring at the massive holographic display before him. The blueprints of Varela Station hovered in midair, their lines jagged and erratic. The main reactor, the heart of the station, was unstable, its power levels fluctuating dangerously. Ridge clenched his jaw, watching as the alien fleet grew larger on the screen, each ship an imposing silhouette against the dark expanse of space. There were dozens of them now, from a dozen different species, all moving in tight formation. No communications, no surrender, just an iron wall of ships descending on the station, like vultures circling a dying animal. A voice snapped him out of his reverie. "Commander." Lieutenant Maya's voice was clipped, but her eyes were wide with fear. "The Drell fleet is demanding we stand down. They say they're here to contain the outbreak. And they mean to do it by force." Ridge's fingers curled into fists. The Drell had always been pragmatic, cold even in diplomacy. But this was a declaration of war. They were not here to help. They were here to eliminate the threat that humanity now represented. He glanced over at Lyra, who was at a console near the back of the room, her face pale as she sifted through data. "I know they're coming," Lyra said without looking up, her voice tight with urgency. "But this isn't about containment anymore. They'll stop at nothing to wipe us out before the rest of the galaxy gets wind of what's happening here." "What the hell are you talking about?" Ridge snapped, stepping toward her. "The virus," Lyra said, finally meeting his gaze. "It's not just a disease. It's a weapon, but it's also—" She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "It's a key. A key to what? To unlocking something inside of us, something buried deep in our biology. The Drell, hell, every species here, knows that if humanity fully awakens, we could change the balance of power across the galaxy." Ridge stared at her, his mind racing. He had seen the changes firsthand, how humans were evolving at a rate that made the aliens' heads spin. But even he couldn't have predicted that the virus was a trigger for something far more dangerous than a simple biological shift. A loud, echoing siren blared throughout the station, the harsh red lights casting everything in an ominous glow. Ridge's heart rate spiked. "They're here," Maya said, her voice trembling. "The Drell are already deploying boarding parties. They've locked down all external access points." The alarm cut off abruptly as Lyra slammed her fist on the console, frustration turning her face a shade darker. "They don't understand. We're not just surviving. We're evolving. But they want to kill us before we finish the process." Ridge turned toward the communications panel. The Drell ambassador's face flickered onto the screen, a cold, reptilian expression staring back at him. "Commander Thorne," the Drell ambassador hissed, "this is your final warning. Stand down. We are here to eliminate the infection before it spreads further. Your resistance is futile." Ridge's eyes narrowed. He didn't have time for diplomacy anymore. He didn't care about making peace. "We're not going anywhere," Ridge growled, voice low and dangerous. "But if you think you can just walk in here and kill everyone, you're making a big mistake. We're fighting back." Behind him, the room erupted into chaos as the first wave of alien soldiers breached the station's outer defenses. The monitors flickered wildly as their ships opened fire, launching massive energy blasts toward the vulnerable station. Ridge's gaze locked on the screen, his pulse racing as explosions rocked the station. But then, something shifted. Lyra's voice was steady, cutting through the panic. "We're not just humans anymore, Ridge. We're something new." Ridge turned to her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're right," he said, voice grim but determined. "And we're not going down without a fight." The lights flickered and dimmed as the first breach occurred in the station's outer wall. Ridge gripped his weapon, ready for whatever came next. The fight for survival had only just begun. And humanity. They were about to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Lyra's fingers flew across the reactor's console, her mind racing as the countdown continued to tick down, each second echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. The reactor's core hummed with unstable energy, its violent pulses causing the walls to tremble. It wasn't just the station at risk anymore. It was humanity's future. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. Not now. Not when the very foundation of everything they had fought for was hanging by a thread. She had initiated the bioresonance override, but what she hadn't realized, what no one had warned her about, was the sheer scale of the transformation. The override wasn't just stabilizing the reactor, it was changing everything. The terminal flashed red, a warning sign in bold letters. Critical energy situation. She slammed her fist down in frustration, the reality sinking in. The override wasn't stopping the core from overloading. It was pushing the energy levels higher, faster, more violently than before. Lyra, you need to stop this. Ridge's voice crackled through the comms, desperate and sharp. We can't afford a full meltdown. I know. She shouted back, her voice strained as she tapped frantically at the console. I'm trying, but this isn't just the reactor. It's like the virus. It's spreading through the station's systems. She paused, unable to finish the thought. What was it doing? What had they unleashed? She wasn't sure if she was talking to Ridge or to herself anymore. Her mind was spiraling with confusion, yet there was something in the air, a heavy, almost palpable charge, like a thunderstorm on the verge of breaking. The energy in the station was changing, warping into something alive, something aware. Behind her, the door to the reactor chamber burst open with a violent crash, and Ridge rushed inside, his armor scorched, his face streaked with blood and sweat. He barely spared her a glance before his attention snapped to the terminal. You need to stop this now. Ridge's voice was raw, his hands gripping the edges of the console, as if willing the system to obey. We're not ready for this. Lyra turned to him, her eyes wide. We're already too far in. Ridge, we've triggered something inside us, inside humanity, something I don't even understand yet. The virus didn't just enhance us, Ridge. It's changing us at the core. We're evolving, becoming. She faltered, searching for words to describe the storm that was building inside her. We're becoming something else. A violent tremor rattled the floor beneath their feet, and the lights flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the room. The walls groaned, as if the entire station were buckling under the strain. Then, all at once, the lights went out, plunging them into darkness. For a breathless moment, there was silence. The air thickened, charged with an unfamiliar energy. Ridge's heart pounded in his chest, and his breath came in ragged gasps as he fought to steady himself. He could feel it now, this force, this presence, growing stronger with every second. It wasn't just a reactor malfunction. It was something deeper, more dangerous. And then, as if in answer to the tension in the air, a soft, almost imperceptible hum rose from the core. The faintest glow began to pulse from within the walls of the reactor chamber, turning the darkness into an eerie, otherworldly light. Lyra stepped back, her face pale, her heart racing, as she reached for the terminal again. It's too late, she whispered. The human genome. It's reacting to the energy. Our biology. It's interfacing with the core. Suddenly, the lights flared back to life, blindingly bright. But it wasn't just the lighting. It was the energy itself. The station seemed to pulse with it, as if the walls were alive, breathing in sync with them. Ridge staggered back, his eyes wide. What's happening to us? I think. Lyra gasped, her voice barely a whisper. I think we're becoming one with the energy. The virus, the core, it's unlocking the potential we didn't even know we had. It's fusing us with the station, with everything. The room vibrated as the station's systems hummed, reaching a crescendo. The walls cracked, the air around them growing heavy and thick, as if something ancient and powerful was awakening. Lyra could feel it, the shift in herself, in Ridge, in everything around them. It was no longer a matter of survival. It was evolution, pure and simple. Humanity was stepping into a new age. But the cost was clear. The station, the virus, the energy, it was all too much. And they weren't the only ones aware of it. Ridge's eyes snapped to the doorway, where drilled soldiers appeared, their weapons aimed squarely at the two of them. But the soldiers didn't fire. Instead, they hesitated, their eyes widening as they watched the growing power around them. For the first time, Ridge understood. This wasn't just about holding the station. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the silent corridors of Varela Station. Ridge's eyes darted to the shadows, his pulse quickening as the distant hum of alien forces grew louder. The Drell were everywhere now. Their soldiers had stormed the halls, cutting down anyone who dared stand in their way. They had a mission, and they wouldn't stop until it was complete. Ridge wiped the blood from his brow, his breath ragged as he took cover behind a damaged bulkhead. The firefight had been brutal, and he could already feel the toll it was taking on him, his body aching, his mind fraying from the constant adrenaline. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Commander," Maya's voice crackled over the comms, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "We've secured the upper levels, but they've breached the lower sectors. We're not going to last much longer." Ridge's heart sank. They had been holding their own. But every minute that passed brought more enemies, more pressure. He glanced toward the center of the station, where Lyra was still working frantically to stabilize the reactor. They had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep the Drell distracted for just a little longer. "We can't let them get to the core," Ridge muttered, his grip tightening on his blaster. "We hold them off, or this station becomes their tomb." As if on cue, an explosion rocked the walls, sending a tremor through the floor beneath his feet. Ridge gritted his teeth, pushing past the pain as he moved forward, his boots pounding against the metallic floors. He could hear the sounds of gunfire ahead, the clash of metal on metal as his soldiers fought tooth and nail to keep the invaders at bay. When he rounded the corner, he froze. The hallway was lit by flickering emergency lights, the floor littered with debris and fallen soldiers. At the far end, the unmistakable shape of Drell soldiers appeared, their sleek, armored forms gliding toward him with chilling precision. Ridge's fingers flexed on the trigger, but before he could fire, a voice broke through the air, deep and guttural, filled with authority. "Commander Thorne," the voice said, unmistakable. "Surrender now, or I will show you no mercy." Ridge's eyes narrowed. The voice belonged to the Drell general, Tazar, a leader known for his ruthlessness in battle. He had seen this general's cruelty firsthand, and he knew that surrendering was not an option. But there was something in Tazar's voice now that made Ridge pause. The general didn't sound like someone who was there for mere conquest. He sounded worried. "General Tazar," Ridge called back, his voice steady but forceful. "I'm not giving up. Not while we still have a chance." A tense silence followed, thick with anticipation. Then Tazar spoke again, but this time his tone was colder, more calculated. "You don't understand, Commander. This war was never about us conquering you. The virus, it's a weapon, not just a disease. Your people were meant to carry it across the stars, to bring destruction to all that oppose you. You are a danger to the entire galaxy." Ridge's stomach twisted. He had suspected something, but hearing it from Tizar's lips made it all too real. This wasn't just about survival. The Drell had been fighting a war they hadn't even known they were part of, against humanity itself. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ridge said, his voice low and steady, though his heart was racing. "You want to kill us because we're a threat. We're only trying to survive. We're not the enemy here." Tsar's expression remained cold. "You don't even realize the full extent of your power, do you, Commander? The bioresonance protocol is a key, a trigger, a force that could reshape the galaxy as you see fit. And once it's unleashed, there will be no going back. Ridge's breath caught in his throat. The truth, the terrifying truth, was finally clear. The Drell hadn't just come to stop them. They had come to prevent humanity from ever realizing its full potential. The virus wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a transformational force, designed to elevate humanity to something far beyond what anyone had expected. But at what cost? Before Ridge could respond, a blinding flash of light exploded at the far end of the hall. The blast sent debris flying, throwing Ridge to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, his ears ringing from the explosion. "Commander." Maya's voice crackled in his ear, urgent and frantic. "Lyra, she's activated the override. The reactor's going critical." Ridge's blood ran cold. He didn't know what Lyra had done, but one thing was clear: the time for choices had run out. Ridge's mind raced as he moved, pushing through the pain, ignoring the fear that gnawed at his insides. The station was collapsing around him, and with every passing second, they were closer to the end. Lyra's fingers trembled as she stared at the glowing screen in front of her, the DNA sample flickering with eerie clarity. The data was overwhelming, flashing too quickly to read, but Lyra was already starting to understand something. Something monumental. She leaned forward, pressing her palms against the cold metal table. Her breath caught in her throat as she adjusted the scanner's resolution. The strands of genetic code twisted across the screen, every sequence pointing toward a conclusion she didn't want to face. Humanity had always prided itself on being different, the only species in the galaxy to have reached the stars without needing the help of genetic enhancement or alien intervention. But this was something else entirely. "Are you seeing this?" Lyra's voice was a hushed whisper, but it carried across the sterile room, cutting through the buzzing silence. She wasn't sure if she wanted someone to hear her, or if she was speaking to herself. Maybe both. Commander Ridge Thorne entered, his boots heavy on the metal floor. His face, always a mask of tough resolve, was tight with concern, but his eyes were sharp. "What's going on, Lyra?" She didn't look up. Instead, her fingers moved rapidly over the panel, isolating a particular strand of DNA. She tapped in a command, and the data slowed to a manageable crawl, revealing a hidden truth. The bioresonance protocol, a subroutine in humanity's genetic code that no one had ever noticed until now. "Human DNA is not like any of the other species," she muttered, barely processing her own words. "It's designed." Ridge stepped closer, his voice low but laced with disbelief. "Designed? What do you mean?" "The changes we're seeing in humans, they're not random mutations. They're programmed." Her finger hovered over the screen, tracing the invisible lines of code. "It's as if our biology has been rewritten." Ridge's frown deepened, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Who would do something like this? Lyra hesitated. The answer hung in the air like a poison cloud. Someone ancient, someone powerful. This was done thousands of years ago. The room felt colder now, the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched, as if the walls of the station were closing in on her. "Are we the experiment?" Ridge's voice was almost a growl. "Did someone play God with us?" Lyra didn't answer at first. She couldn't. The possibility was too terrifying, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the full extent of it. Instead, she let the data speak for itself. The genetic code she had uncovered was intentional, every change made with a precise purpose. And the strangest thing, it had been waiting for the right moment, the right conditions. "I don't know who did this," Lyra said, her voice strained. "But we're not just humans anymore, Ridge. We're evolving at an alarming rate. Physically, mentally. I don't know if we can control it." The door to the lab slid open, and a group of engineers rushed in, their faces pale with fear. "Lyra, Commander," one of them gasped. "The containment's failing, again. This time, It's spreading faster. The virus. It's mutating beyond anything we've ever seen. Lyra stood abruptly, the screen's data still flashing in her mind. The virus was interacting with the human DNA in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. It wasn't destroying them. It was accelerating their latent abilities. And the longer the infection spread, the stronger the transformation became. "What's the status on the rest of the station?" Ridge asked, his voice now a sharp command. "Everyone's showing signs of progression, except the humans," the engineer replied, glancing nervously at Lyra. "But if we don't get control of this soon..." Lyra didn't need to hear the rest. They couldn't stop it. The bioresonance protocol was no longer a secret. It was a force that was awaking, and it was changing them all. Turning toward the door, she set her jaw and spoke with more determination than she felt. "We need to find out who's behind this. Now." But as she stepped out of the lab, the question gnawed at the back of her mind. What would happen to humanity once this transformation was complete? The chamber was alive with power, the very air trembling with an energy that was both alien and human. Lyra's heart raced as she stood at the reactor's heart, her fingers still gripping the console, though her mind was far from the screen. The bioresonance force was surging through her veins, through every fiber of her being. She could feel it, like a pulse in her chest, a hum that vibrated in the marrow of her bones. It wasn't just the reactor anymore. It was humanity itself awakening. Ridge's voice cut through the crackling tension. "Lyra, we have to end this before we lose control." Her eyes snapped to him, his face drawn with concern, but there was a quiet fire in his gaze. Determination, and something more. Something primal. The resonance had unlocked something in him too. "We don't know what we're dealing with," Lyra said, her voice trembling. This power, it's not just in the reactor. It's in all of us now." Ridge took a step forward, his boots clicking sharply on the floor. The station's energy coursed through him like an unseen tide, and for a fleeting moment, he could feel it. A rush of strength and awareness that made his senses sharper, clearer than ever before. He knew the others felt it, too. The soldiers, the civilians, they were all changing, their biology no longer bound by the laws they once knew. It was the dawn of something new. But at what cost? "I can feel it," Ridge said, his hand clenched into a fist. "This isn't just evolution. It's a force that can break us. We can't let it spiral out of control." Lyra nodded, her eyes flicking to the open doorway where the Drell soldiers stood, weapons raised, but frozen in place, as if caught in the same trance. Even they seemed to be aware of the power now building in the air. They had come to destroy humanity, but it seemed they were now witnessing something far beyond their comprehension. Tsar, the Drell general, was among them, his piercing gaze fixed on Lyra. "You've done it," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You've unleashed it." Lyra turned to face him, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. "We didn't choose this," she said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to be this way." Tsar's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, there was no malice in them, just the quiet recognition of something far more ancient. "You have changed the rules, human. You have become more than what we thought. This power, it will consume you if you are not careful." Lyra took a deep breath, steadying herself as she glanced at Ridge, then back at Tsar. Her thoughts were swirling, a storm of possibilities and consequences. The power was theirs, but it was also a ticking bomb. They had no idea how far this change would go or how it would affect their minds, their bodies, or their very essence. But one thing was clear, they couldn't stop it now. The virus, the resonance, the power, it had already become part of them. A pulse of light flared from the core, bright and overwhelming. The ground trembled, and Lyra instinctively raised her hands to shield her eyes. The room seemed to pulse, the very fabric of reality warping in response to the energy flooding through them all. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, blinking in the sudden stillness. The world had shifted. The drill soldiers were on their knees, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. It wasn't just the station that had changed, it was them, too. "We're all connected now," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. "All of us. Human, drill, everyone. This is the future. This is humanity's true power." Tsar's lips curled into a grim smile, but there was no anger in it, just an acceptance of the inevitable. "You were right. The galaxy was never ready for this, but it will have to be." Ridge stepped forward, his eyes focused, hard as steel. "We're ready, but you're going to help us," he said. His voice was steady, unwavering. "Because if we don't use this power for the right reasons, it will consume us all." Tsar stood slowly, meeting Ridge's gaze with the faintest nod. "Perhaps humanity isn't as naive as I thought." As the energy in the room began to stabilize, Lyra exhaled slowly, her heart still pounding. They had done it. They had unlocked a force beyond anything they could have imagined. And now, the real work would begin. But as the drill soldiers lowered their weapons, Lyra realized that the stakes had shifted. No longer was this about survival. It was about shaping the galaxy, rewriting the rules of existence itself. Humanity had proven itself capable of extraordinary things, and the galaxy would either accept them or bow before them. The choice was theirs to make, and they would make it together. The station shook again, this time with a force that rattled the walls and sent sparks flying from overhead conduits. Lyra stumbled, her hand reaching out instinctively to steady herself against the console. The alarms screamed louder, their shrill wail filling the room, warning them of what was coming. The Drell fleet outside had launched an all-out assault. The countdown to their destruction had begun. "Are we ready?" Ridge's voice was like a rock, cutting through the chaos of the control room. Lyra didn't answer right away. Her fingers flew over the panels, eyes scanning the incoming data. The station's outer defenses were barely holding. The Drell had adapted quickly, launching coordinated strikes that tore through the station's shields like they were paper. There were only minutes left before they'd breach the core itself. "We're not ready," she said, her voice low and grim. "But we're going to have to make do." Ridge's jaw clenched. He was a soldier, not a scientist, but he could read the situation well enough. They weren't going to survive this unless they fought back, and fast. He turned to Maya, who was stationed by the communications panel, her face pale from lack of sleep but still sharp. "What's the status on the remaining troops?" Ridge asked. Maya's fingers moved quickly, pulling up the station's defense grid. "We have a handful of armed personnel scattered throughout the station, but we're massively outgunned. I'd estimate we have enough firepower to hold a few corridors. Maybe. We'll have to make it work." Ridge turned back to Lyra. "Get to the reactor. We'll buy you time." Her eyes met his, unspoken understanding passing between them. Time wasn't something they had much of. But they were humans, and humanity had a way of surviving against impossible odds. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it was them. Lyra nodded, pushing past him toward the door. But before she could step out, Ridge's voice stopped her. "Lyra," he called. She turned. "Whatever happens, don't let them find the biocode. Don't let them know what we really are." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers from him, from everyone. But right now, there was no time for that. She just gave a tight nod and stepped into the corridor. The sound of her boots echoing in the empty hallways seemed almost surreal, like time itself had slowed. The station had once been a place of diplomacy, of peace between species, but now it was a war zone. Blasts of energy collided with the walls, sending debris tumbling to the floor. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the once pristine halls. Lyra moved quickly, her mind focused on the task ahead. The reactor was their last hope. The station's power grid was failing, and if the Drell reached it, there'd be nothing left to stop them. If she could get there in time and initiate the bioresonance override, it might buy them a few precious minutes. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of armed humans. They were tense, their faces grim, their hands tight around weapons that looked far too small for the task ahead. "Dr. Juno," one of them said, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "We've got to breach 2 levels down. We're holding the line, but we can't." "I know," she said, cutting him off. "But you need to hold just a little longer." Without waiting for a response, she pushed past them, running toward the reactor. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of her, the tension building in her chest with every step. She could hear the screams of her fellow soldiers, the distant sounds of explosions. It was all coming apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As she reached the reactor chamber, the door slid open with a hiss, and she stepped into the cool, dimly lit room. The control panel blinked ominously in front of her, red lights flashing, indicating the failure of the cooling systems. Lyra's heart raced as she rushed to the terminal, typing in commands as fast as her fingers could move. The reactor was seconds from going critical. The energy levels were rising, the core about to breach the containment systems. If she didn't act now, everything would be lost. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she initiated the override, her eyes glued to the screen. And then, for a moment, the station seemed to pause. The power surged, and the reactor began to stabilize. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, they had won a small victory. But Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The Drell were still out there, and if they found the core, if they found the truth, it would all be over. And she was about to make the hardest decision of her life. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The cold, sterile walls of the med bay had never seemed so suffocating. Outside, the sounds of battle echoed through the station, but in here, the air felt thick with something else, something ancient. She paced around the dimly lit room, her fingers brushing over the scattered data pads and digital screens. She had been digging through old Terran archives for hours now, trying to find a clue, anything, that would explain the unsettling changes happening inside her body and the bodies of the humans on Varela Station. But as each moment passed, the truth became harder to ignore. She slammed her fist down on the console, a sharp burst of frustration cutting through her. Every file she uncovered pointed to the same conclusion, one that gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. There was a reason humans were evolving so rapidly, and it was no accident. "Lyra." Ridge's voice came from the doorway, a soft knock accompanying the words. "I need you to focus. The aliens are pushing harder. We don't have much time." Lyra didn't turn to face him. She couldn't. If she looked him in the eye, she might break. She had never believed in fate, not in the way people talked about it, like some force guiding their actions. But now, as she pored over these ancient records, the word kept echoing in her mind. Fate. "Just a minute, Ridge," she muttered, swiping through more encrypted files. She needed to be sure. She needed to prove to herself that what she was seeing was real. The files were old, too old for anyone to have bothered with. But as she dug deeper, something started to make sense. Humans, she realized, had been designed, not by nature, but by an ancient race far older than any of the species they'd encountered. Their purpose? Survival. Designed to adapt, to evolve in the face of any threat. To be perfect. Her mind flashed back to the first day she'd noticed the changes. The way the virus seemed to enhance their bodies, making them faster, stronger. And now, looking at the data, she understood. This wasn't just an accidental side effect. This was part of something much larger, something that had been embedded in humanity's very DNA. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The virus wasn't a disease. It was a trigger, awakening something that had been dormant for eons. "Lyra," Ridge said again, his voice more urgent this time. She finally turned, meeting his gaze. His eyes were full of concern, but there was something else there, something deeper. He had always been the steady hand, the calm in the chaos. But now, even he felt the weight of the unknown. "Ridge," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We weren't supposed to know this." Ridge's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The truth," she said, her eyes searching his for a sign of understanding. "Humans weren't meant to discover this, not yet. The bioresonance protocol, it's been hidden, erased. Whoever did this to us, they didn't want us to remember what we were, what we can become." Ridge's face hardened, and for the first time, Lyra saw the edge of fear in his expression. "Who did this to us, Lyra? Who could have known what we'd be capable of?" She shook her head, her mind swirling with questions. "I don't know, but whoever it was, they're still out there. And they're not going to let us live if they find out we've discovered the truth." A sudden loud crash reverberated through the station, shaking the walls. The comms panel blinked urgently, announcing the breach of another section. Ridge's eyes narrowed. "I guess that answers our question." The fight was on. Lyra's heart raced, not just from the urgency of the moment, but from the realization that what was happening to them wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a reawakening. They were on the edge of something far more dangerous than the Drell or the Kotheri. They were on the edge of becoming something that no one, not even the gods of ancient history, had dared to imagine. And there was no turning back now. The quiet hum of Varela Station was the only sound that echoed through its sterile metallic halls. Outside, the stars spun in their eternal dance, the distant suns casting their cold, indifferent light on the floating station. The small outpost, once a hub for galactic diplomacy, now felt more like a coffin drifting through space, silent, trapped, and slowly dying. Dr. Lyra Juno's boots clicked against the floor as she moved with urgency down the narrow corridor. Her sharp green eyes darted from side to side, scanning the station's control panels, each flickering in an almost hypnotic rhythm. Something was wrong. The air had a heavy chemical scent now. Something was burning, something alive, in a way that didn't belong. "Lyra, are you sure about this?" Commander Ridgethorn's voice crackled through her communicator, rough and ragged. It didn't sound like him, not with his usual gruff certainty. "I'm sure," she replied, keeping her tone calm. It was the only thing she could offer right now. "But it's not what we expected. The virus is mutating, and I think it's affecting the biology of everyone on this station, except the humans." The station had been quarantined just 2 days ago, after an outbreak of a viral contagion that had spread through the alien species first. The Varela Station's primary purpose was peaceful diplomacy, a meeting ground for dozens of species. No one had anticipated this, an infection that only seemed to target alien physiology. It wasn't natural. It couldn't be. "Then why aren't you in the med bay, Lyra? This isn't your area of expertise." Ridge's voice held the familiar edge of concern. He couldn't help it. She was the one who knew the biology of their enemies, known as much for her expertise as her sharp tongue. "I don't trust anyone else to handle this. Not with what's at stake," she snapped, her steps quickening. "I need to see the samples." The med bay was a short distance away, and Lyra's pulse quickened as she reached the door, swiping her access card to unlock it. Inside, the room was cold, far colder than it should have been. The lights buzzed erratically, and medical equipment hummed in the background, its monitors flashing with alarming data. The medical staff stood frozen in the center of the room, their eyes wide and filled with a panic that wasn't meant for doctors. Alien species lay in beds, convulsing and thrashing violently, while humans observed from the corner, unscathed. Their bodies were starting to shift, and Lyra wasn't sure if it was a good thing. "Is it affecting us too?" one of the alien diplomats, a Kotheri, asked in a voice laced with fear. "No," Lyra replied, her voice tight. She felt the weight of every word. "But it's changing us. Something's happening on a genetic level. It's like your bodies can't process it, but we can. Our DNA is reacting." The Kotheri gasped, her eyes darting to the humans gathered by the wall. "What do you mean, reacting?" "We're evolving," Lyra murmured under her breath, not wanting to admit what she already knew. But the rest of you, you're dying, and we have no idea why. A blast of static filled the room, and Lyra's communicator crackled to life again. Lyra, you need to get to the reactor. Now, the containment's failing. Everything's going to go critical unless we stop it. It wasn't just a virus anymore. The entire station's infrastructure was collapsing, and the problem was rooted deeper than anyone had anticipated. The real question wasn't how to survive. No, the real question was, what had humanity become? Lyra's heart raced as she turned back toward the door, her fingers brushing against the cold surface of a nearby panel. She wasn't sure if she wanted the answer to that question, but she would find it, whether she was ready or not.